Well, thank you both for taking the time to join me.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
thanks
our
for
pleasure,
having
man.
us. Thanks for having us.
So before I talk about Fatman, we'll go way back to the beginning. How did you both get into directing?
Oh, interesting. So I think when we stumbled upon the idea of making movies, because Ian and I came to it a little later than some. We talk to some of the young folk now, and they go to like film high school.
And they've been wanting to be directors since they were 10. And that didn't happen to us where we grew up. It was kind of in the sticks, and that was not an occupation. It just wasn't something you thought of as an occupation. You didn't know anybody who did anything like that or anywhere near that. So yeah,
even though it was only about 3.5 hours north of Los Angeles, for us, movies were made in some faraway magical land, and then we just rented them from the video store every weekend. So while we had a reverence and a love for cinema, we did not understand that was a job.
It just seemed really far away.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm gonna be an auto mechanic.
And I thought maybe I would coach wrestling and be an English teacher. That was kind of the idea. But then we went to college, and I went on a wrestling scholarship. Esh went on an art scholarship.
This is while I was trying to become a professional paintball player, though.
So he was hell bent.
That didn't work out, but I ended up having a proclivity for art, and so I ended up getting an art scholarship for painting and drawing to go to art college.
And while I was wrestling my way through college, I was an English major, and I started really getting into I'd always been a big fan of writing and creative writing, but I really started getting into sort of analytical side of it and playwriting, and really kind of diving into some of the classics and getting excited about it. And then I was a theater minor, so you can kind of see how those start to kind of form together into something that kind of looks like, oh man, like movies, are just on the edge of that. And Esham was at art school, and I was wrestling and a student at college. And we had this incredible moment where I was watching these two movies one night at like midnight, and there were two movies back to back on like an independent film channel, like an IFC or something. And I remember calling him in the morning and saying, I just watched these two incredible films last night. And
I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I just watched two incredible films last night.
And unbeknownst to each other, in different states, he was in Kansas, I was in California, we were watching the same movies on the same kind of up all night, and we were both having this weird paradigm shift, and that we realized that's what we wanted to do. And it was The Barfly and The Real Blonde. And what was interesting about those films to us is that we could actually see how they were made. They were limited locations, limited characters, very character-based. And it wasn't like Predator or Aliens,
Terminator 2,
where there's so much effects and there's so much world building that you can't quite see the seams, or we couldn't at the time. These movies were in a bar, in an apartment,
and so you could sort of see like, we could write some dialogue for our friends and like just go to the local watering hole and start shooting that. And so that's sort of what we started doing.
We started making short films in the early 2000s. And then we decided, you know what, let's move down to Los Angeles and give this a run. And we didn't know anybody, didn't know anything about it. We just moved down to Los Angeles and started talking to the people that at the places we were working, because just about everywhere you work in Los Angeles, there's aspiring directors, aspiring producers, and aspiring actors and aspiring writers. So we dumped ourselves right down in the middle of it, and just started trying to figure it out. And of course, everyone's got ideas and thoughts and connections to a manager and a lawyer or an actor that they know or something. And you just start picking all those people's brains and start trying to figure it out.
And I started working at a very prominent movie chain called the ArcLight. And everybody there, there was a bunch of people that had gone to USC Film School and all that stuff there. So that was kind of a really great creative hub for us.
And I was working out of at a Tony Roma's, which is a rib joint, like a restaurant. And there was a ton of like aspiring actors and writers there. And so and we ended up working with them. That's where we cast our first movies out of. We cast them out of the restaurant and the movie theater. So we pulled from the environments that we were in, and we directed our first film. We were in town for about 6 months when we realized, everyone's got a script. Everyone's got a.
And I'd gotten rear-ended in a car accident. Yeah. So instead of repairing my Volkswagen bus, I just did it myself. I didn't pay for someone to do it. And then we took the money and we bought the prosumer DVX 100 camcorder that had just come out at the time.
Which was a great camera at the time, because it was the first time you could really make it was rough, but it looked, if you could get the lighting right, it looked kind of like 16 at the time. 16 millimeter film, and we'd never shot on film. Luckily this camera came out right as we literally landed in town. And so we were like, oh, well, this is going to be a more cost efficient way to shoot things. And it was. We bought the camera and we just started shooting it like crazy. We shot everything, like a ton of shorts, a feature, 2 features. And then like
we were just jumping on other people's projects and shooting those just for experience,
just trying to get experience, just trying to figure out how to do it, how to do it better. And we shot our first feature film in like 03
for like $1,500.
For $1,500. We did all the posts and edited ourselves on an iMac computer.
And it was just like, you know, the Final Cut Pro was out, so that's what we were using.
Yeah, and we shot it in like 7 days with some of our friends out while camping, because it lent itself to that, and we wrote it to lend itself to that. And yeah, we just camped and shot for 7 days. And the toughest part was driving back and forth and trying to get the batteries recharged. And our dad lit the whole thing. It was a crew of 3 people. It was me, Esham, and our dad. Our dad was a professional photographer for 20 some odd years. And we ended up borrowing his tripod and a couple other things he had in the garage that he wasn't using anymore.
Because he'd since retired.
Yeah. And he lit the whole thing. We had, you know, a certain amount of night shoots as well. He lit the entire movie with a bounce card and a flashlight and 2 Coleman lanterns from Walmart.
And then we just lit a fire.
And then we lit a fire. The fire helped a ton as well. But yeah, I mean, that's how DIY it was. It was $1,500, us and our dad, and like 5 of our friends that we cast out of a movie theater in Tony Roma's, all doing it for free. We put the $1,500 into the, you know,
hard drives
and tapes and the food to feed everybody. And then we edit. The post didn't cost us anything but sweat equity because we had a computer and we were just editing it on there. And then we got into a couple festivals with that film, and that really opened it up for us. We got into the Palm Beach International Film Festival. That was a top 20 film festival at the time. And I remember sitting in a real movie theater, and there was only like 50 people in like a 250 seat seater, but it was incredible to hear the laughs. It was incredible to hear people reacting where we wanted them to react. And it was also incredible to hear them not reacting. And we were like, uh-oh, this thing is too fat. And we literally went home and cut 10 minutes out of it, just because we'd never seen it with an audience before. But yeah, that's how we began. And we got so hooked from that moment on.
I think we were in our early 20s.
Early 20s, yeah. We were in our early 20s. We were 24 and 25 or something like that.
2 or 3, something like that.
Yeah.
That's real. That's like real old school independent filmmaking, isn't it?
It was, man.
Man, I'll tell you what, it doesn't change that much as you go up.
That's the crazy thing. I think once we made another movie after that one for $5,000. That one's called Night of the Dog. And Night of the Dog went on, and we made it the very next year. But that one went on to win all the festivals and then some that we'd gotten into the year previous with Squirrel Trap, which was what that one was called. But we went from Squirrel Trap, Night of the Dog, won a ton of festivals, and then we got representation because that film, even though it was a very low budget, was very entertaining. And they were like, okay, your next film is going to be a $5 or $10 million film. And we were on board with that, of course. And we started writing. They're like, write something that's a $5 to $10 million film. And in the early 2000s, that really was kind of how it was working. You do an indie that caught fire in some way. You'd write a script, and you get a $5 million movie going with, you know, this and this actor that made up the money and at a minor mini studio. And that was kind of working for a lot of greats at the time. And we were super pumped to try to go that route, and it didn't quite work out for us. We ran up right against a financial crunch.
Well, there's a confluence of things too, because you also had the writer's strike.
Yeah.
So it compounded it.
It was
and then all the
early 2000s.
Market. What's that?
The writer's strike. It was like early 2000s, wasn't it? Like
07 or 8.
I want to say it's like 08. This 07 maybe.
Directly precede the financial collapse.
I think it was right before the financial collapse. So, and then the bottom fell out of the DVD market, and this is like 07, 08 now. No. And then the financial crunch happened, and those movies we'd been working on for like 2 or 3 years, 4 years, I think, when by the time we actually made something again, had all like devalued in a way that $5 million film for like a quote unquote first time filmmaker, even though we'd made a couple features, they weren't of like high budget and with, you know, acclaimed actors. They were just us and our friends. They weren't willing to give us $5 million to go make anything. It had turned into $2 million. And so we wrote another script that was what we thought we could do for $2 million.
And then the death of the DVD market.
And then once the death of the DVD market happened, that $2 million film turned into a $200,000 film. And they said, sorry, you now have to come up with something that's $200,000. That's what we'll give you funding for. And so we wrote Lost on Purpose, which was our $200,000 film, and then rose all the money ourselves and
put all of the savings into it.
We put everything we had into it, and then went out and raised the additional funding, and then got some great cast members on that and shot that. And then really led down the path to where we're at now.
Yeah. And I think like when we talk about savings, like, you know, we've been working as swimming instructors here in LA. So, but I was doing storyboards and Ian was teaching swimming lessons. So taking all the money that he had saved over like the last 6 years and put it into the film as our nest.
And we would go to potential investors and just say, hey, look how much money we've already raised. You know, it was our own money, but it was also, we had some first money in. We had a few $1,000s in there that people would be like, oh, wow. Great.
And we were also like, well, no matter what, we have this $50,000 we can go make a movie with. So if we can't get any more, we're going to make it for 50 grand.
So no matter what, we were going to shoot it for what we had, you know. It was either going to, it ended up being a $200,000 movie, but we were ready and prepared to go out for 50, which is what we initially started out with.
That's crazy. Like you basically put everything you had just into a film, and we're just gonna hope it took off. That's insane.
Well, and we never made the money back on the movie. So, but what it did
is it opened doors. It made an opportunity. Opened
a lot of doors and opportunity for us. As we won like 20 some odd B+ film festivals. We didn't make it into Sundance or anything, but we won a lot of little festivals or a lot of medium festivals. And some like a producer saw it on that festival circuit and said, hey, like, how did you do this? How much money did you shoot this for?
Because when we had that movie budgeted by a Los Angeles line producer, we're like, hey, you know, like we need this really independently minded. He's like, I got it. Came back and he budgeted at $8 million.
We were like,
are you kidding?
I think we can do this a lot cheaper. So we came up with our own budget, very indie minded, coming off of a $1,500 and $5,000 feature films and doing all the posts ourselves. We were like, well, we could do cheaper than this, I'm sure. So we came up with a $200,000 budget and then had a contingency of a $50,000 budget if we had to do it that way with like a 10-person crew. Yeah. But yeah, we ended up getting the $200,000 and shooting it. And then the producer that saw it on the circuit was like, I have this book, I have $500,000. Will you read it and see if you can come up with a version that you can do for $500,000? And we did, pitched it to him. She and a couple of her producing partners, and they liked it enough to where they were like, okay, we want to do this. And we said, well, we'll write the script for free if you guarantee us you're going to green light it. And they said they would. So we wrote it. And within 6 months of us writing it, we were literally over in Utah casting and like doing pre-production to shoot it. And that was an incredible like moment for us as filmmakers. And one, we weren't spending our own money. And two, like that process of 6 months from starting to write the script to shooting is just incredibly fast, you know? And after that film came out, we sold it. And then the producers on there said like, hey, what do you have that you can do next? That was a great experience. So we passed them this crime thriller we had written over that other 3 or 4 years of no man's land before the financial crunch, which was Small Town Crime. And we said, we've got this crazy thriller. It's nothing like Waffle Street, which we just did with you. But we're very passionate about it. They read it, liked it, gave it to their financiers. And there's a little bit of, you know, us using some talented friends of ours and them being passionate about it. Like Octavia Spencer came on Small Town Crime and as an EP first, and then took on the role of the sister afterwards. But that was really the catalyst to getting that film going. And then
John Hawkes came on board. Yeah. Bob Forrester came on board, you know.
Anthony Anderson,
Katie Lotz, it just rolled out. We had such amazing collaborators.
Jr. Yeah. We were able to make that film and then point back to that film when we were trying to make Fatman to say, this is the tone we want to do with Fatman, because we wrote the script 14 years ago for Fatman, but it was such a crazy script. We'd go into meetings and they were just kind of like probably wanting to see the maniacs that wrote it rather than make it. And they were like, someone's going to make this one day. And we're like, well, we want to make it. And they're like, well, you can't because you haven't done anything big enough yet. And you haven't shown the tone. Like they were like, this tone is crazy. Like, what is it?
Like, well, it's got a little drama. It's got some dark humor. It's got some action. It's got some thriller.
It's got some Western undertones. And they're like, yeah, what is this? And then we did Small Town Crime, which has all that as well. And we were able to sort of point back and say, it's like this, it's like this. And then we got a lot of traction with it and people came on board and we were able to get Mel and here we are.
You ever find, because you write and direct together, do you ever find yourselves clashing heads? Like, especially when writing, if you're writing and you're keen on the character, but then you're not keen on the character, are you like, he should go? And you're like, nah, he should stay. And you're like, but he should go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fortunate in that we're blessed in that we sync up quite a lot on a bunch of material. Like we spend a lot of time as kids watching movies together, and I think our tastes really synthesize through that process. Now, when it gets to writing, we'll absolutely disagree on things occasionally, and I think Ian puts it this way: the most passionate person usually wins.
So it's like if we're fighting about something, if he's hell bent on getting this line in there or this character going this route, I'll let him have it if I'm on the fence or whatever.
But that will take sometimes some line readings, some scrutiny, maybe some tweaking. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a ringer, but our sort of benchmark is if we both like it, then it ends up in the movie.
Yeah. So we don't ever really quit until we both like it, and then it goes in.
You mentioned there that you grew up liking the same movies. What were your like go-to movies when if it was a Saturday night and you were going to have a marathon? What would be like the go-tos?
I mean, look, we grew up in a time of Star Wars and Indiana Jones coming out on a VHS tape, and that was a big deal for us. We watched those into the ground. But I would say some of the most seminal work that inspired us for this film and like Small Town Crime that reaches back to our childhood, what we grew up on. It seems strange, but our mom was a big Clint Eastwood fan. And so she got something called the Clint Eastwood Collection at the time. And they would send a new
Eastwood classic
on VHS tape every 2 weeks. And so it would be his entire catalog, but it'd be like, all the Leone Westerns, but it would also be all the Dirty Harry movies.
Sudden Impact and
then you'd see like his oddball ones, like, that aren't not oddball, but they just aren't franchises, like Eiger Sanction, where he's climbing the mountain, and Firefox, where he's flying the jet. And like, there's just all those, like, he had such a catalog of amazing films, and we would just watch them to death. So like,
but I think the Westerns and the crime thrillers are what we gravitated towards.
So what going on, the Western theme was sort of throughout, it was an undertone of Fatman. When you wrote it 14 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who did you have in mind when you were writing it?
So 14 years ago, in our heads was Jack Nicholson for the main man, for Santa. But obviously Jack, slowly pulled himself out of the business, and he's not working much anymore. And we were at a screening in 2016. We were at a screening for Hacksaw Ridge, and we saw Mel doing a Q&A afterwards with that beard. And he was at the end of the awards circuit. So he'd been doing a lot of these, and you could feel the weight, and he was a little worn out. And of course, he'd just come off the movie.
But he still had the spark.
He still had the spark and the passion, but you could also feel the weight on him. And he was stroking his beard, talking passionately about the movie. And we were like, that's the guy. Like, that is the character right there. He's killing it. And we were hell-bent after that for him to be our Santa after that. So cut to 3 years later, we had finished Small Town Crime, so we had kind of an example of what we wanted the tone to be, and then we passed the script to Mel's agent. And at that point, we're taking a ton of meetings with producers and financiers, and we're getting emails that are like, hey, let's talk about the script. And we got one email that said, hey, I really enjoy the script. I think it's really funny. Let's sit down for a chin wag. And we were like, what's a chin wag? And second of all, like, okay, hey, I write him back. Awesome. Great. Like, let's sit down and chat. Who am I talking with? Because there was no sign off on the email. He's like, oh, hey, sorry, I forget to sign off sometimes. This is Mel. And we were like, holy shit.
His email wasn't like Mel Dude 25 or anything like that. So he had no idea what he was.
It was like a synonym. So we were just like, okay, there was no link to him in his moniker. So we were super excited. They said, hey, you've got 45 minutes to sit down with him at a cafe. We're like, great. And 3.5 hours later, we emerged, and he was pumped about it. We were pumped about it. And he was telling, we've said this before, but it was this amazing moment during the meeting where we knew we had the right guys. He's talking about those elves, and he's talking about how he's on the balcony and he's addressing them, and he's got to tell them this really bad news. And he feels like the character should be in a spot, emotional. He's about ready to cry. This is like the worst thing he's ever had to tell them. And we're like, yeah. And he's like, and that's what's going to make it so funny. And we're like, exactly. Like, he really understood right away the layers and how grounded we wanted to play it.
the good thing about the film though is you've got the underlying humor, but you've played it so straight that like it come across great. It's really hard to explain unless you're watching it. You know,
Right.
you've avoided all the goofy cliches, and it actually you actually sort of like Santa's kind of badass. You could see him with a bottle of Jack, you know, popping a
Oh, yeah.
cigar.
Right.
No, absolutely, man. We definitely wanted to take like the grounded approach to this, right? Like we figured that for us, the movie lost its impact if you went farce, if you tipped it over the top. So for us, we absolutely wanted a grounded take on this man, and that way the stakes were elevated.
Yeah, the sort of high noon or Leone Western version of what Christmas could be or should be, with those characters so grounded, and you've got a nice. Yeah, we liked to introduce you to that character for the first 20 or 30 minutes, that he's a normal guy. You get to get into him as a person. And then all of a sudden those tropes start to sort of come in, and you see the sleigh and you see him in his jacket and he's got the book and then he's going off to Christmas. And you're like, wait a minute. Like, that's right. He's fucking Santa Claus. Like, I forgot. Like, I was taking him as a man in the beginning, and maybe he's doing some not so Santa things in the beginning, like shooting a gun and drinking a shot. And like you know, like he's a little grousy, he's a little grumbly, you know, he's a little pissed off at the world, but he's trying to figure it out. You know?
Yeah, he may be a saint, but he has idiosyncrasies and foibles.
Yeah, we liked grounding him with the humanity of what Chris or Santa would be having to deal with, you know.
Well, minus Mel, the hitman, like he's like the counterpart, and he, in a way, plays more of a central character than Mel's character. So, how did you find the perfect hitman?
Well, we were, obviously we were trying to find the perfect skinny man, which is how, as he's labeled in the movie. And we met with some people, and they were all great, and they would have done a really fine job with the role. But I remember when we sat down with Walton, it was just undeniable that he was the skinny man in our universe. Like, this is the guy, we have to get him. And I don't know. I mean, it was just like when that actor comes to you and you're sitting there across from them, it just makes sense.
You can see it. You're just like, okay, yep.
You're like wearing the character like a coat, it just seamlessly works.
And yeah, he was amazing. He really brought a lot to the role, as far as like, there's what's on the page, and then there's how the actor interprets what's on the page, and how they interpret that blueprint that you sort of put in front of him. So he's a lot of fun to work with, man. He's so intense. He's so in the moment. He's one of those guys that can just let everything kind of fall away from him, I think. And whether he's sitting in a grocery store or wherever, he can imagine he's, in a pyramid in Egypt if he had to, and immediately go into that place. And this is where I am. This is who I am. He's so great. He's so committed. It was great to work with him.
And when originally writing, who was casting the role in your heads 14 years back? Was it like Crispin Glover or something? Or
he's a good comp too, but it was probably more of like a Johnny Depp at the time, someone that, because Johnny Depp, he's a little different now than he was back then, but he was a little more of a chameleon back then. He would really jump in and out of roles, and you couldn't quite see the guy that had been in the last one, and now he's so famous. I think it's hard not to see Johnny Depp when you see Johnny Depp or Jack Sparrow or Keith Richards, or you see so much influence from all of his work that it's hard to be like, that's this guy, but you see Johnny Depp and then the character usually, but that's not always. I just saw a great trailer for a friend of ours movie who looked pretty great. He's playing a famous photographer, which looked pretty great. But but Johnny Depp at the time was kind of our, and 14 years later that changed. It was undeniably, undeniably Walton Goggins,
So let's talk the finale without being spoilery.
We'll do our best here.
Was it always wrote the way it was?
Yes.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, it takes you aback. I don't know how you seen it when you filmed it, but when I was watching it, I was sort of like, did they? Didn't they?
Yes, and right. Like, and I feel like that's hopefully we've seeded the movie with enough left turns that unexpected that you're like,
you think,
are they that batshit bananas? Like, that they actually, and like that, you should have that moment.
We want you to have that moment, which is why we hold for so long, and why we sort of come away from it and leave you with that. for as long as we do. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're absolutely after that, and we were excited about that. Yeah, I think
I think it makes sense either way, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, like, so that, I mean, that's
yeah,
that was the intent.
We have a lot of fun in our movies. Like, we really have a lot of fun and try to subvert your expectations, whether it's even with a casting choice or whether it's a left turn, like something as simple as, I don't think this will ruin anything for anybody, but it's something as simple as having that police car beneath the Alaska sign as Skinny Man drives in, for us is a great moment to get the audience going, oh, there's a cop and he's going to pull him over.
Is he going to get pulled over?
Oh, and then it goes past. And you're like, oh, that was just kind of a red herring. Oh, okay. I guess I was jumping to conclusions, and I guess I need to sit back and just see where this is going to take me.
But that's what we want. That's what we're striving for.
We want to put you on your heels a little bit. Like, we want to screw with your expectations to a certain extent, and then hopefully when you get there, you're like, yeah, that was earned. Wow. They were able to do it in a way that I wasn't able to see it, but it feels earned.
Did you just have Mel for the entire shoot, or were you only given like a certain amount of time to get all Mel's bets done?
Well, I mean, he certainly had a schedule and he was in and out. We didn't have him for the entire shoot. We had to be economical with his time, but we had him for enough time.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of time with him, and he was really committed to the role. I mean, I know he had another movie that was going right afterward, and I remember us saying, like, okay, when do you need to be out? And him just making sure that we had X amount of days to, if we needed reshoots or needed him an extra day, we probably could have, snuck him in if we had to.
We were on time and on schedule and didn't have to call in any favors.
Thank goodness.
Well, it was an awesome movie, and it's going to be a cult classic anyway. It's going to be up there with the Home Alones, especially for the action.
Oh, thanks, man. From your lips to the movie guy's ears, dude. Let's do it.
Can we expect to see Santa ride again?
Love to.
Yeah, when we first wrote it, we wrote it as a short story. Each of us wrote a different short story from the idea, and I wrote something that was a lot more of a prequel, and Esham wrote the seed of the idea for what we ended up with, the contemporary version. And of course, man, we would love to take this and do a sequel with it as well. So we have an idea for both, really. We have his origin story, which we're super excited about, and then we also have
the next evolution,
where this can go.
Well, it can go, because going through the movie, if I remember correctly, there is no backstory of Santa at all. There is nothing that says he was this, he was that. There's hints here and there, like when they first meet on like the battlefield, the first thing he says is, "You think you're the first person to try and get me?"
Yeah.
And that's the only thing So the only thing you can kind of gather is over some X amount of time, people have been taking shots at Santa.
It's happened, man. Well, and also, he's got some collateral damage on his body, right? There's some scarring, there's things like that. So, he has a history, but Ian and I are also fueling off of the previous incarnations of the Santa lore, right? Like, we already know he delivers presents to everybody, he flies out at night. So we're working off of that, and where we needed to adjust those previous
expectations,
knowledge, we did it. In this world, Santa's real, right? Like, he's not something that only kids believe in, and parents are like, "Hey, little Susie, he's not real." And then at the end of the movie, no, everyone believes in Santa. He's a fixture of the world. So that's what we had to establish right off the bat.
It's like I was thinking when I was watching it, I was like, do you know what? If you take away the Santa character, I was like, this is what Riggs is doing now. And then I was like, these guys do Lethal Weapon 5.
Dude, when we went to color the movie, it's hilarious because our colorist came away, he saw it, he calls back, he goes, dude, it's like Riggs is 65 and he's Santa.
Like at the end, I thought Danny Glover was going to pull up with like a flask of cocoa and start shooting out the window.
I would love to have
that. Would have been
cameo.
amazing. That really would have been amazing.
So after you've rode the sleigh of Fatman, what's next for you guys?
We've got a couple of irons in the fire, and I mean, this is just coming out, so there may be more options coming our way after this, as it usually does. But it's hard to, as this business is, it's like we've got 2 or 3 things we're super excited about doing that we're working on currently, but it's like which one of those is going to go first, I'm not sure. But yeah, we've got 2 or 3 things in the fire right now that are on their way to hopefully pre-production, and whichever one goes first, that's what we're going to do.
And I think, you know, these would be our us. We're excited to dip our toes in other genres.
What is your favorite genre? Well, between the
I don't know that we have a favorite. We're pretty eclectic.
That's a good question.
But I would love to do, Ian and I would love to do something in like the thriller horror space, and then we'd love to do something in the science fiction space.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it was awesome speaking to you.
Dude, thanks for having us on, man. It was
great,
fantastic. Yeah.
And Fatman is unreal. And to anyone who hasn't seen it, do so. It's out now.
Yeah, so it's in theaters, you know, here in the US, 250 screens or something like that, and then we'll be in the US VOD on the 24th. I'm not sure what you guys are over there in the UK.
I'm not too sure either. Everything's closed.
So hopefully it comes to VOD around a similar time there.
Yeah,
hope so, because it's a Christmas movie. You can't really have it out in like January or February.
it'll definitely be before Christmas.
It better be.
Guys, it was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Hey, our
brother.
pleasure, Jeff. Thank you so much, brother.
See you guys later.
Have a great one, man.
Have a great night.